All right, welcome to another LinkedIn Live. This one I am super excited about. I guess I'm. It's an interesting time. I guess I won't say I'm excited because I saw a lot of layoff news yesterday, so it was timely. But originally when I reached out to Vishnu here to do this conversation and get started, it was tied back to a post he made that I thought was like wonderfully tactical. Some really great advice for when it comes to job hunting, job seeking, and trying to land a role. And I thought it would be really helpful for folks for us to just spend some time talking about what does it take to land that role. Since then, I've recognized that Vishnu, it's like what, it's 1 year since like you originally got that first interview.
Exactly 1 year to the date.
Yeah, man. So I think it'd be helpful if we just like pause and we give some background on you. You're in an engineering role now. You started in sales, but also like the like high level of like, they ghosted you for a month. Give me some background.
Yes. So I was leading a team of Stanford students and software engineers. We were building disaster management and pandemic management tech. And yeah, it was insane because I've kind of been in engineering or AI research pretty much all my life. And that's how I think about a lot of things. For example, when I see an email, I instantly visualize like an attention heat map and try to think, where's the algorithm going to focus on. So I
Yeah.
digress. But yeah, I was leading a team, and we were building a lot of cool things. But I realized that team culture was probably the most important thing I could add to as a leader. We had an engineer. He was formerly a bike mechanic, actually, and I hired him to join us because he showed an insane ability to pick up software engineering like really quickly. So, but the only thing was, our whole team was required to be on site, and he had a 5-hour commute from Arcata, California, to Silicon Valley, um, which is insane. He'd like sleep on my couch and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So that's when I realized, like, oh, I want to build like workplace tech that makes remote work possible and so much more intuitive and so much more collaborative. So from the get go, it was like from a very intentional point of view that I wanted to look for companies to work at.
Interesting. Okay. And so like you kind of had this like startup-y style experience, so you were looking to go do the startup thing.
I was looking to do the startup thing. I was also considering possibly interning at larger companies like Slack or Salesforce,
Mhm.
but was super excited to just go out there and evangelize remote work.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm curious, like, how did you come across Nooks? I guess is it through Stanford where the other founders got started as well?
Well, it is quite a coincidence because all the founders pretty much worked at the same lab that I worked at, the Stanford Vision and Learning Lab. But we'd never heard of each other before, and while they were still in school. So I trialed a bunch of remote office software and so many different tools, and it never really stuck with our team. Most people say, especially SDRs, I've heard at like collaboration tech companies, say that collaboration tech is like so sticky, but somehow once common workplace tools have gotten ingrained into most people's tech stacks, it's getting really hard to adopt something new. In
Yeah.
my team particularly. And when I saw Nooks launch TechCrunch a couple months after we trialed and kind of failed to implement anything substantial, I was like, oh, like this looks great. Like they have kind of a very simple interface and exactly what we needed. Um, I'm gonna, instead of just like using it at our team, I'm just gonna go prospect them, see if they're looking to hire anybody.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So you spent a month trying to reach out. What were you doing that wasn't working?
Yes. So one thing that didn't work off the bat was just like sending in my resume. Turns out
Yeah.
like over 250 people did the same thing,
Mhm.
and they were just, you know, a pretty small team, overwhelmed with inbound, could not get to like responding.
Yeah. First tip of the day: don't just drop your resume and expect good things to happen. Uh, Go on.
100%. They had an easy apply too. And when I saw that, I was like, you know, I'm gonna beef up my LinkedIn and just click on easy apply. Did not work. Did not get any communication at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that was step one, and then like what? We're like 7 days in now. What's the?
Yeah, well, I'm commenting on the TechCrunch article, commenting on like LinkedIn posts that people are making too, and yeah, slowly I kind of like made a map of the key stakeholders in the company, or so what I thought from the outdoor perspective.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Like I imagine some of the thought process was you're commenting on the post, you're commenting on the article, thinking like you're gonna bring your name back to the surface, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, that guy applied. I saw that resume." I can tell you as
exactly.
a founder on the other end, I don't have. And so like that resume was sitting there, and I was like, "Oh, that Vishnu guy is really cool. I appreciate him like giving our article so much love." And then like that's it. Never made
Yeah.
a connection.
Never made the connection. Exactly. And I don't think my resume was even opened up until my interview was scheduled. So they probably just saw like my name or my email address in the file name,
Yeah.
and they're just like, "Oh, okay." Um, yeah. If I could go back, I do certain other things that we can get to soon. But yeah, to continue the story, pretty much 7 days in, 14 days in, I started DMing their advisors on Twitter, and that's when I started getting the first responses. And I was like, okay, so maybe there's a shot. So I basically went on Twitter and I found out who had reshared the TechCrunch article, and kind of who was evangelizing about Nooks, and made a list spreadsheet of like Twitter handles and people and their email addresses if I could guess them or find them online.
It's huge. Yeah.
And I wrote these insanely long DMs that when I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is disgusting.
It's uh, yeah, I think one of the things we like forget when we're writing the DM is like we're typically writing in the like big view. And then the view that they get is either this little view or it's like I think about LinkedIn particularly, it's that little teeny tiny chat window view.
Yeah, that's something I like painfully found out later on, that if your message is bigger than that tiny pop up, uh, chances are people are just gonna be like, okay, close.
Yeah. That mental spam filter is strong.
Exactly. And it's one more thing. Like when I was DMing the advisor, I just thought that, you know, I should provide as much context about me and why I like personally have an ambition to work at Nooks, in the most like detail possible, which is
Yeah.
something like from a reader perspective. When I'm reading messages, I somehow feel that most of the context is just like implied, right? I get it. I don't have to read like I am so and so and I would love to work at so and so. And those
Yeah.
lines is just like completely ignored. If I was writing it again, it'd be like super short. Just maybe, you know, just cut to the chase exactly what background I relate with in Nooks as a software engineering leader myself and why I'd want to work there.
Yeah. Um, so the other piece here is okay, so like you reached out to some of the advisors and you were getting responsiveness. What were they saying back?
Yeah, they basically told me that they're gonna send a message in like Slack or like email basically to the founders and just remind them that I've applied, and they gave me some context too, that, you know, they just launched and had a huge wait list of like users to get to. So that's what was causing the delay, and I sort of used that information, that inside information, in my subsequent outreach. So I sent an
Yeah.
email to the CEO of Nux, Dan Lee. Sorry, did I say email? I sent an in-mail to him and basically said that, hey, just spoke with advisor name. They said you're busy with the launch. You have like 450 people to get to. Congrats. Just wanted to throw my name in there. Saw that you have these roles. Uh, Interested to chat further.
Yeah. So is this the start of the sequence that you kicked off? Because I know you. I was like, I'm eager to screen share your post, but I'm curious.
Yes, this
That was
is pretty much the start of the sequence.
okay. So I'm gonna screen share so we can walk through it, right? So like, don't apply with a resume. Step one. Instead, steal my sequence for hiring managers. Now, this is the post that got me super excited to get you up on here.
Love it.
Make a cold call, which like wild. Nobody does that. I can assure you if like I looked at my voicemail and I said, hey, saw you're hiring for this and I'm really interested in it, I would know for certain that person was interested in it. It's similar to how I
100%.
feel about when like people DM me on Twitter. Like that's a very quiet inbox. And so when somebody does that in a unique way, it definitely stands out. Record a video. I am curious to dig into that a little bit more. Build an ideal persona list. And so you're going to filter on who you didn't want to enjoy working for. How do you know this? Well, you network with people on their team, or in your case, maybe some of the advisors, and then set up the following sequence. So I'll let you take it from here.
Exactly. So this is the same framework I used to get my name basically to stand out across like 270 folks.
Also
And
appreciate the show.
of course, yeah. Essentially, chatted with someone that they definitely know, and reference some information there. Saw you're helping something about the mission, and maybe add in a line that specific that most people don't know. For example, one of the advisors just told me something about the future roadmap of Nux or some of their priorities that I just could easily reference off the bat, and I kind of knew that okay, so that also aligns with my own direction that I want to go in,
Yep.
and it's also something that if someone sees this, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's so relevant to what I'm going to do right now.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting thing that I see so few folks do is tying your skill sets sort of back to like dropping the resume, right? If somebody says to me, like, hey, well, here's all the skills I have, here's all the things that I can do great, this, that, and the other. It's no different than if I showed up with a cold email and I said, here's all the features that Lavender has to offer. Like, good luck translating this back to the challenges that you have at hand. And like, please respond when it's convenient. And so like the way that you describe that, right? It's like, here's the things that they're working on and here's the overlap of how I can help, right? When I think about sales, I think about what we try to tell people to do. You're trying to help these people make progress. And so one of the reasons that they're hiring is they're looking for new people to help them make progress towards those goals. And so the way you line this up here and the way you talked about it is key, because it's not just like, hey, I have like a React background and I can code front end. It's, hey, since you've got a Chrome extension, I know you've got a or like, given you're in the inbox, I imagine it's super important to you that that code works really fast. Yeah, that's a huge piece of my background, and what I love to work on is making front end code really seamless and not buggy. Yeah. Does that sound like something you need help with right now? I saw you're hiring for that front end engineer. It's so simple, but all of a sudden, like, I have front end experience helping make apps run fast becomes something that I can easily translate back to what I need.
That is terrific. Well, exactly how you phrased it, and I think it's even more important during a time of layoffs or when leaders are looking to scale down staff. The fact that you are aligned with the direction that the business is going in, and you can come in and say like, hey, here's the impact that you want to see, and here's how I'm relevant to that. that's exactly kind of what happens, I feel, in an economic downturn. Whether it's founders trying to create a new company, or folks trying to get a job, it's the fact that you're trying to carve out a certain space for yourself within the team, and you kind
Mhm.
of relate with that creating of a space by putting out in front of the hiring manager exactly what impact you see you can bring to the team.
Yeah, and I think, our experience is largely startup, right? But I don't think this is unique to a startup. And the way it translates when you're talking about a bigger company just becomes, instead of like, oh, cool, they know what they're doing and they can like hit the ground running, the mindset becomes like, oh, the amount of effort and energy that I'm gonna have to put into ramping up this talent is much less. And that makes my life easier. And so like, because you like understanding what they have to offer easier and like how you're going to help them. They almost like, to quote Sam McKenna, right? It's show me, you know me.
Yeah,
You're just showing up and you're saying like, hey, I get exactly what's going on, or at least I think I do. Correct me if I got this wrong, but
yeah,
yeah, this is where I line up. I think that's core. Um,
I
I got
completely agree.
one. We got one question in the chat, which is, Will, would you be kind enough to spill some insights, flow here on how Josh and Dorothy stood out in a sea of applications?
Oh,
So we'll get to that, but I want to get through this first because I do think this is interesting in and of itself. Because I don't think I've ever heard of an applicant cold calling before. Now, I guess it kind of makes sense in the sense that Nooks is a cold calling software. Was that the thought process behind it?
um, I think the thought process behind it was, yeah, if I knew that Nooks was going to be building software for people who cold call, then I'd have totally cold called them back then because that's just instantly relevant. In fact, I think the founder, one of the founders' cell phones was in the job description and still is, by the way.
Man, he laid that up, and I guess you probably didn't take him up on it.
Yeah, yeah, they did not.
That's
um, but specifically in this part, I think it was the fact that a large part of what SDRs do, if not cold emailing these days, is cold calling. So it's a skill that a lot of folks like don't have that much practice with, but uh, and hiring managers, they often try to. It's very hard to run a cold call mock through in an interview. I feel it's like appears very scripted sometimes, and you don't really get a signal on which whether this person can cold call total strangers or not. So if you are kind of leading off the bat before the interview happens, right? Cold call the manager. It's a real cold call happening at that point, and you're basically showing like maybe 50% of skills that you need for a job in pretty much an instant. Um, so that was the main reason why I made this point number two. Like if you're an SDR, cold call the manager.
Yeah, and it's so wild that like folks don't recognize that there's so many corollaries between selling yourself for the job and like going after the job. One of the folks in the comments asked, "How did you find the numbers?" That was through the job posting. They had actually posted their phone number there. But that said, there's plenty of tools out there to help you snag that phone number for free. And then additionally, going through gatekeepers. So I think with gatekeepers, in this particular type of cold call, it's probably a little less of a blockade, right? Like if you think about cold calling into a large organization, you might hit a gatekeeper. The fact that you're searching for a job inherently, like people are going to root for you. And so it's like, hey, like totally, say I call you, I'm looking for an engineering job. I'm getting into back end all of a sudden. And I'm like, I get your assistant and they say, hey, Victor's in a meeting right now. What do you, how can I help? Or whatever they say, right? Like who's calling and is he expecting your call? Probably more accurate. And I'm like, yeah. Vishnu posted a job posting for backend engineer, really interested in the role. And I want to just have a conversation with him. Was he expecting your call? No, he wasn't expecting my call, but I don't imagine he's expecting many calls from job seekers, right? Because it's just
Exactly.
like, call it out as like what's obvious and just say, I'm excited about the job and I want to talk to him. And then if they say, like, I can't patch you through right now, I'd be like, cool, give them my number and let them know I'm excited. Definitely follow up with them via email as well. Like, that's how I'd handle a gatekeeper in that scenario. So,
That's exactly how I would as well. I think if you've sent an email, which you probably should have before the cold call, just mention that to gatekeepers too. When I was in high school and I was trying to interview a bunch of folks in government and who used to be in government for like interviews for a history project, I'd get to all sorts of gatekeepers and I'd call them and I'd just be like, send them an email, not expecting my call, but just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Does he have like or does she have a couple of moments to help me out? And they just like patch me through.
yeah,
um
yeah,
these days, however, I think handling a gatekeeper might not be as much of an issue because folks are also working from home. And as well you said, there are a bunch of tools there that'll even provide like mobile phones, and calling a mobile phone is totally not like infringing on someone at all. Just go for it, make the call. People will
yeah,
pick up
absolutely.
and yeah, have a conversation. We
Yeah,
love
and
it.
even if like they go straight to voicemail or like they don't pick up, just leave a quick voicemail note and reference the fact that you're trying to get a hold of them via other channels so that they can start to tie the like connection together that you on the other end are excited about the job. It's not like it's not a huge imposition on this person on the other end to be getting these messages.
Exactly. In fact, my in-mail that I mentioned I sent earlier never got a response. But the first thing the CEO said when he came in my interview, Dan, he just said like, "Oh, saw your email. Sorry, I didn't get back to you yet." And I was like, "That's all I needed, right? You know my
Yeah.
name now." um,
Mm-hmm.
and wherever my name's going to appear in the future, whether it's on a Twitter thread or a LinkedIn post that I make about why I'm excited about like remote work software, you're going to see that, and you're going to be like, "Oh, gotta get back to him."
Yeah. So okay. So you cold called. Did they pick up?
No. Did not. Um,
And that's why you sent a video. So now I'm curious, like, okay, so you put a face to the name. Let's talk through how you approach this.
yes. So biggest fan of all these tools that let you record videos. Because they show like a key thumbnail in like the first 5 seconds that you record it, and I basically found this trick that you just kind of like optimize the thumbnail by writing on a whiteboard person's name and showing it up to the video, and especially people who are not used to like receiving videos, they will like, oh, okay, what's this video about, let's click on it. um, and yeah, that is kind of my thought process was, they're gonna, my goal here is just get that first interview, just like SDRs want to get that initial discovery meeting, right? And the way I'm gonna do that is just by showing, how I look and how I talk in an interview and make them interested in chatting further with me and hearing my thoughts. Um, so what I did was I not only recorded like 30 seconds of me talking, I also put together two Notion docs. And that's something I wanted to add in a follow-up post. But I think that was based on what I heard after, was instrumental in kind of speeding up the whole interview process. And I basically put together one doc, just about probably 2 pages, on all the
Yeah.
comments I had on their current outbound and marketing strategy. Um, I went on Twitter, found tweets about remote work or about Nugs that had not been responded to or retweeted, and put them into Notion and said like, "Hey, you guys should act on those. That's some customer love or possible customers right there." Basically finding leads early on. And yeah, I also kind of outlined a couple of strategies that I'd use right off the bat, in a role should I get it. And second doc was engineering comments, and it wasn't even like getting low level. I just opened up the app, went through different screens, went through a couple of other apps as well, and made some comments on what I think they're using and how that relates with what I've used before. And
Yeah.
Found some bugs too. Back then, when releases were like super quick, we're iterating super fast. We found some
Oh
bugs, just
yeah,
listed them
inevitable, inevitable.
and
Yeah, that reminds me a ton of when Dorothy and Josh were applying.
Mhm.
Josh built out a ton of different Google Docs. Dorothy built out. She was working at Mural at the time. She built out a big old mural map of like, here's how I like sort of see the big picture and like all the intricate pieces going together. That stands out. It just shows that like they're eager and excited to get into the work. It's not just like, 'cause I think some of this stuff, like if it could come across as like inauthentic if you're just like aggressively like reaching out and doing all this stuff. And so like showing that extra layer that says like I'm excited to get into the work is a huge one. That was actually one of the things I wanted to talk to you about when you were talking about like DMing advisors, like, sense for the direction of the company. I think about like, yeah, networking not only with folks that are at the company or advising the company, but also networking with, folks that the company is trying to sell to or use trying to get to use the product and get a feel for, how they think about what you do, how you solve it. Because if you can bring that insight into the conversation, document it in like a thoughtful way, it just shows like, oh, this person's to get going and hit the ground running. Um, they're sort of doing the job without even being asked in a way.
Exactly. No, I love that. Like talk with their customers. Talk with people who possibly could be their customers, and that's something that could also be scaled. Like if you're applying to 3 or 4 or 5 positions, you can just set up
Yeah,
those meetings. In one week, and especially if they're competitors, you'll get a lot of insight,
yeah.
and you can even provide some competitive information as well.
And to that point, right? You said like even if you're trying to scale it, and then you're like 3 or 5, right? Like that's really how you should be thinking about it. I think so many folks think about who they reach out to in such of like mass scale type approach. They're just like dropping resumes. They're trying to just like apply to as many jobs as they can. And I think that is probably the worst approach we could be taking. So I pulled up one of our advisors, Amy Volus's scorecard that she gives to job seekers to try to help them really map this out. But when I think about targeting, which is one of the first things I wanted to talk about today, this is
Mhm.
key, right? It's asking yourself the tough questions and like building out a scorecard that works. So it's like defining what it is that you actually want to go do. Figuring out the attributes from your past experience that you're going to actually like dig into and enjoy. I see so many folks just like, it's like they get out of like a toxic relationship with employer and then they like don't necessarily do the reflection to go into the next good relationship, or they don't necessarily think through where they want to go next. And like, sometimes just a great opportunity shows up and they got to go take that, right? And that's awesome and super fortunate when that does happen. But a lot of us, just try to play the numbers game with this. And then the first thing that comes along, we go and take it. Now, I see so many folks fall into that trap. And it's like, hey, pause, reflect, let's figure out what's the right next fit and like build a really narrow list of companies. One of the things that, always impressed me, I reached out to somebody a couple weeks ago where they had announced they were moving on to greener pastures, and they had particular experience that I was interested in. And I was like, hey, do you want to help us build out customer success? And they responded back with, well, I've been thinking about this and I don't want to build, I'd rather tweak. So I don't think that's the right fit. And I don't want to waste both of our times. I was like, sick. Right? Like
That's awesome.
you're gonna be really happy wherever you end up because you're actually like thinking about it. Um, it's wild to me how we don't do enough of that. Um,
I
so
absolutely agree. Um, yeah, I think a lot of the urgency is also driven by a lot of what we're reading online, and a lot of popular culture. For some reason, suggests that unless you move fast on offers or interviews, you're not gonna get the job, and they're gonna pass you on for somebody else. But if you followed pretty much most of the strategies that we've talked about and we're going to talk about with targeting or setting up this sort of a sequence to get name recognition, odds are you're on top of the list. And it should be kind of your responsibility at this point to, during the whole process, either create or modify your understanding of what your role is going to be and what that company culture is, what the management culture is to work at, and see if that matches up with your own expectations. Because yeah, like you said, the first offer people get, sometimes they just go in for that. um, just like sometimes it's hard to get offers, but also other times it's like super easy. um, and offers will come in or interviews will come in and you're like, okay, like I'm just gonna keep going there. But it's like that should not be the case. Take a very methodical approach, just like they are on the other end to evaluate you, evaluate the employer, evaluate the manager, and
mhm.
evaluate the role. It's easy to sometimes convince yourself that you can grow into a role, um, but once you're in the weeds of it, often that's going to lead to burnout because you find you can't switch easily, or you're just committed to that now. you know, there's no exit for you. Um,
Yeah, that reminds me of so I've been sort of de facto taking over some sales ops stuff internally, and like we were joking in a Slack channel yesterday. I was like, I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. I suck at this. This ain't my happy place.
love that.
Respect for those that can do it. I just like, yeah, not my my forte. But to your point, right? It's we think like, oh, like that seems like a good role. Like, what does that role really mean? Like, especially if we're trying to like pivot our career right now, and it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I want to go from this to that. Have enough conversations that you actually know what that means, and then have the conversations with the employer so that what you think it means matches up what they think it means.
100%. And don't rely on job descriptions alone. Job descriptions are mostly flawed. I personally feel in like two areas. One is often the way it's written. And I used to write job descriptions at my previous company too when we were hiring like GTM people, software engineers. Um, you have a lot of specific like problems that you feel like you want to solve by hiring more people, and you kind of squeeze all of those problems into like a concise description and just put it out there. And folks who are going to read it often don't have context into why it's written that way or why there's so many points, and often instinctively they might think like, oh, I'm not qualified for that, like I should just move on, or that's like too much.
Yeah,
um, yeah, that is
yeah, it's
something
like
that
that's my dream candidate, but or they put the job description together, and by they put the job description together, they took a copy paste from somebody else's website and they posted on their job description. I was hearing back to Amy Volas. I was hearing her talk about that on Thursday Night Skills a couple weeks ago, where she's like, half the time they didn't even write that thing.
exactly. Yeah, that's the second flaw. They just go to like careers.google.com or some big tech company or some huge
Mhm.
organization, copy, paste, that's it, done.
Yeah,
Just change like,
great,
our
great way to
mission or
save time.
yeah, precisely.
Um,
And that's kind of why the role that you might end up after taking that job may not even align with the description, because the role is different, the company is
yeah,
different. It's just like a template. So make sure like you verbally like have like that contract, or just like talk through like a day in the life and make sure it aligns with what you want to do and what you feel
yeah,
that you're going to be good at. The third thing also is what you think you want to learn too. um, you know there are some parts of a role you might want to be like challenging in like a vertical extension of the domain that you're already comfortable with, so you can learn more and grow in
yeah. That's interesting. Um, I'm curious, Vish, are you hiring right now?
that. We are actually we are hiring software engineers, machine learning researchers, and today it's kind of I'm gonna say it out before it comes out, but we're hiring a CS lead for customer success.
Beautiful,
So
man. We got samesies.
look at that.
Look at that. That's cool. So with those, do you have job descriptions posted out?
Yes, yes, we do. I think this is the CS particularly. It's gonna come out very soon. Landon's gonna make a post.
Right.
um, but yeah, it is there. It's not ideal, I would say.
Yeah. No, it's
And
funny how you say it. That's why I was asking. I'm like, yeah, it's such a funny thing because like we'll say this and then we'll like totally be our own worst enemy. And so like you
yeah,
have to, yeah, back to Emmanuel's comment, right? It's just part of you just has to ignore the job description. And it's like, okay, I kind of get a sense for what you're looking for, but you still have to dig deeper. You still have to do the extra work, especially if
100%.
you just want to stand out, right? Um, yeah, one of the things that should be just like a common theme from this conversation is just ditching the resume altogether. There's like so much more that you can accomplish with like a well-written cold email than you can with a resume. I think about what everyone else is doing is they're clogging their applicant tracking system. And so, if you don't have the right keywords, you're not going to show up. If you're just dropping your resume in their inbox, they're just kind of ignoring it because it's too much information to absorb at once.
Yeah,
One of the great things about like cold email in this perspective, this is one of the key reasons we give it away for free to job seekers at Lavender, is like you can show someone how you think and you can show somebody that there's clarity behind those thoughts and that like you're not just like regurgitating some template.
exactly. Completely agree with that, Will. And most templates for resumes, it's hard to like diverge a lot from a template because you only have like one page. Most resumes are meant to be like just a singular pager, and you're just like listing out. It's inherently a list, right? And you're trying to summarize pretty much either your accomplishments or what you did or some variant on the job description of your previous job, and that
Yeah.
doesn't really give any context into like either what you're really good at or your specific contributions or how that's even relevant to where you're applying.
Yeah. So we're talking a lot about reaching out to the ultimate hiring manager. I think one of the things that stands out from your experience, as well as folks that have stood out in experience, like selling to us, right?
Hmm.
Selling themselves into us, like to give you like some context, like Josh, when he applied, one of the things that he did was he went and reached out. He like heard mid one of our conversations that we were looking to get G2 reviews. Well, he went and reached out to 20 plus individuals and went and got them to leave G2 reviews. Now,
Wow.
yeah, it's just like stuff like that stand out. But I'm also thinking like it'd be interesting if he did some of that on the front end and like kind of got back to what you're talking about with the advisors and like how do you get into the conversation, which is, had he looked at those G2 reviews and like reached out to those individuals, I'm curious, like, what did you say to those advisors that got them to respond, got them interested, or maybe better yet, like, how would you change it so that you would reach out better next time?
Yeah. That's a great question. I was going through my Twitter DMs just like yesterday, just to remember what I said. Um,
It's always you have that moment where you're like, oh, I can't believe I said that.
exactly. Yeah, apart from the cringiness of the length, I think what really caught their interest was the fact that so there was a key event that I was referencing, which was the fundraising event, the seed round. And these
Mhm.
key events can be pretty much anything. It can be hiring someone new, new leadership coming in, or just someone announcing a cool feature or a funding round. Fundraising rounds are great because they're likely like hiring for many roles at that given point in time.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also not so great because a lot of people are reaching out and they have a lot going on. So kind of what I referenced was the advisor's specific background. I'll just pick one. She used to work in Salesforce earlier, and now she was helping Nooks kind of grow. So I referenced the fact that, oh, I just saw this. Looks like, you know since you guys just raised the seed round, you're going in a specific direction, and that sort of relates with kind of what I've seen on your background as well. I'd love to talk to you. I can't believe I said I'd love to. I know that, not really a
Uh,
recommended phrase, but anyways, love to talk to you about how I could add value in this specific case, where I've seen that you're probably adding value as well, and take over like that specific segment of the scaling that Nooks needs to do at this specific moment. So a lot of
all right,
variables
I got a
essentially.
little behind as I was typing.
Ah.
All right, so we got key event. We're tying in their experience. Then we're tying it into an insight that you're deriving based on like what you think the company's direction is going. Driving, no, Google.
Exactly.
Tie back to a key insight that you're deriving. What do you think the company's doing as far as direction? What was the next piece?
The next piece is like how my prior experience can help in that specific direction. So I actually made a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet had 4 columns. One was, all the names of people. Second column was what was their experience prior to Nux. Third column is what I think their role is in Nux, and what their priorities are. And the fourth column is whatever my experience has been in the past that is relevant to any of their experiences. And essentially, I built this list of like, I think 10 or 12 people, that I feel I could reach out and still be relevant to what I can add value in. And it made sense to like do account based at this point because I
Yeah,
have the whole account map, right? So all I got to do is just put this into a template of sorts, and send it out because I know it's like going to be relevant and I know it'll catch their attention.
yeah, that's such an interesting. Like, not enough people are doing that, right? It's like, okay, who do I think my potential boss would be, and then I'll go reach out to them. But there's like a wealth of information that's existing within that organization. Um, so you used this framework largely when you were going after those. Like, I sort of think of it as when I talk about account strategy, you've got the waterfall, which is like how you're reaching out at the top and sort of like
Mm,
working your way down. And then you've got the journalist, which is I'm looking at the end users on the front lines, and
yeah.
I'm trying to just get in and ask questions and be a generally just curious person. Um, so curious, how did your approach to people within the account differ?
It's always been a journalistic approach that I've taken. So ever since like I actually graduated high school at 13, and I was looking for new projects to do and like labs to work at when I get into college, and I instead of going to like faculty or like deans, head of departments, I'd straight away go to like an undergrad student, a grad student, or a postdoc working in a lab, and be like, exactly this approach that we're talking about here. And that's the same approach that worked at before I came to Nux and at Nux as well, and even to scale Nux, right? I was cold calling SDRs, instead
Yeah,
of like people who make decisions, and it really like the amount of insight that you get into what your role can be becomes inherently compositional at this point, right? You're tying together people and their like attributes, their experiences, and the
yeah,
relations between those people. And you're trying to figure out in this knowledge graph of source where you can place yourself into. And that's the first 5 minutes of when I came into the interview and they asked me like, tell me about yourself. That's exactly what I said. All the people, all their roles, pretty much. I summarized that, and for each of those roles, how I could add value and how I've done that before.
yeah. That's interesting. Because I'm thinking like, okay, the key thing that differs by people within the quote unquote account, right? Company you're trying to go work for is their experience, right?
Right.
So it's like, hey, so you just got this funding round. Say you're the person trying to go work at Nooks to head up CS. What are you trying to do at Lavender? whatever. You're
Both are great
like,
teams.
hey, saw this, the key event could be simple as like, hey, I saw you're hiring for somebody to lead up CS. Yeah. I know your background isn't in CS, but when you think about, so this is sort of a different take on your framework, which would be like more of like key event, their experience, and then tie their experience into I love me today. Their experience, and then tie their experience into just a general question about what would be a best fit for that role. Because like that, just like general curiosity could spark the like level of insight where you go back up to the top and you say, yeah, hey, Vishnu talking to Gilbert about how he sees SDRing at this company being successful, and I think I've got those best fit qualities, right? Sort of back to how you were talking to the advisors. That's sort of how I've always viewed reaching out to individuals throughout the org.
I agree. That's a great question. It's like an open-ended question. Uh, I feel like there are inherently like two types of roles too. One is kind of creating a new category, like being a CS lead.
Yeah.
You're trying to abstract from someone else's job a specific part of that and take ownership for that. And the second is you're trying to scale something. Like if you have a team of SDRs and you're trying to add a couple more SDRs. And for both types, there's like two different like ideas of like being a best fit, I feel.
Yeah.
And in the category creation type, you're more trying to ask like questions like, what do you see right now that if someone came into this role would improve, or how do you what specific problem do you think this could solve? And you'd probably have some sort of insight. Like for you, Will, you're probably doing a lot of the customer success right now, and if you had someone else to do that, you could spend your time on higher leverage things. Same for us here as well.
Yeah.
Or if you're hiring SDRs, you're like, okay, so you have this engine of growth and you're just looking for people to scale it. What's the best SDR in your team doing right now that you want your next SDR to emulate? So you have someone to look up to, and you should probably go talk with that person before the interview as well,
Yeah.
if you're getting this level of insight from someone else in the organization.
Yeah, and like I think what's key about what you just said there is like you ask that question, they give you a name, you could easily just go reach out to that person and be like, hey, when I asked this question to this person, your name was top of the list. Curious. Like, what would you say have been like the key attributes that have made this like well for you?
Exactly. I have a funny anecdote for that. I was using the same approach to like sell Nooks pretty much, trying to do some intel in the organization at the lower level. And I called an SDR and he mentioned another SDR's name to kind of get more insight into how do they do call blitzes. Since Nooks helps teams with call blitzes. And I was like, okay, great. Ended the call her, the next SDR I got it as referral. They're both in the office sitting right next to each other. And then she picks up and, oh, okay.
Oh, that's rich.
Like that is so funny. So sure, you might catch people like sitting right next to each other, but hey, your name's getting out there. They'll know you now.
Yeah, no, but seriously, that I mean, like part of that, especially in the early stage kind of stuff, is like being able to make that kind of noise. We had a few folks that reached out to like Casey specifically, like when we were looking to bring on sales talent. Just it's like that one extra thing. It's not necessarily like the reason we're going to hire them or we're not, but like it certainly stands out because like we talk, right? So like I talk to Casey every day, multiple times, probably more than he would like. And so like I think that, like, yeah, he's sitting there, he's like, hey, by the way, are y'all interviewing such and such? And like the other thing that like stands out is when like you reach out to customers of a company and you ask them like particular questions and you try to like dig in, like, hey, what could they have done better? What could be doing? Um, you know, they pick up the phone and they shoot me a text. You know, it's not like we
Love
all live
that.
in a vacuum here. So like these things, all this effort, like if you do them with the right intention, right? I'm not saying do it with the intention of like you're going to generate that buzz because like somebody will be in the office next to the other person, but it's so under like people just don't think about doing it enough because like it's an easy way to like generate conversation about you.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Um, and that's such a insane part of LinkedIn that they promote more like applying with your resume and applying with your LinkedIn profile, turning that into a resume, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe suggesting that you post about the fact that you applied to a role, um, which is something that can keep people accountable to not doing like the spray and pray approach. If you just post about your journey and share some of these conversations that you're having in an
Yeah.
organization, just reference it like, hey, I spoke to this person, like they're doing so and so, it's so cool. um, if you agree with that, that is, then I mean that's a great way to like be intentional and generate buzz at the same time, because you can't make 100 posts if you apply to 100 companies, right? That's just not possible. And one more
Yeah.
thing you
So it
said.
kind of goes back to that. Like you got to build that scorecard. You have to be thoughtful about it. Otherwise, like it's really not going to be genuine and authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back to you wanting to work at Nooks. Like that was genuine. You were like excited and eager, which requires some of that like reflection to be like, this is really where I want to go. I will get ghosted. Like it's almost like a litmus test of like, would you be willing to get ghosted by a certain company for a month in order to work there? If no, even if maybe, like you should probably say no and put it on like your second tier list.
I agree with it. Um, and honestly, waiting a month also helped me kind of consider the fact that do I actually want to work here full time, or should I just, go back, work in AI research? Because it's not that I didn't like something, or I had a toxic relationship working in a group before coming to Nooks. It's just the fact that, it genuinely excites me, right? And so that essentially goes back to the fact that, no matter what state you're coming from to look for a job, make it intentional and plan for it to not like happen like super quickly in days. A
Yeah.
month is like okay, honestly.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some other things that I've seen. I get a lot of requests about like, hey, are you guys open to hiring in X country? Or hey, are you open to hiring remote? And or like,
Hmm.
yeah, it doesn't matter where this person is. It's like this that, and the other. I'm like, if you're the right person, to me, it doesn't matter. Other companies have different policies, and they probably have to document those policies, so the questions aren't really necessary.
Yeah.
So like in my mind, if it's not listed, it's probably less important than you think it is. Um, that'd be one other thing. The other question I saw within the chat was InMail or email. And I've got my thoughts on this. I'm here. What are yours before I jump in with like a bunch of rants about this?
Love it. Yeah, my thought is treat InMail like voicemail. Um, with voicemail, your odds are you're not going to get a call back. But if they hear it, they'll see it for sure, because many people do not leave voicemails, or it's a robo voicemail. They'll remember it, and if you shoot them an email, I've gotten decent conversion from a voicemail to like a cold email reply, or if I call them back, you know I say like, hey, this is Vishnu, ring a bell. They're like, yes. So InMail is kind of the same way I view it. Now I personally don't get over like probably like 5 InMails a day. So if people are getting more, maybe they're just not even reading it. But I read kind of an InMail. Generally don't respond because quality of pitch, I've not seen it to a point where it's relevant for me personally, as an IC. But I remember the name, and if they were to call me back or send me an email or reach out to a different channel, then I could relate it with something I saw earlier, and that's been my personal experience as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I 100% agree on like multi-channel being crucial regardless of your approach. The voicemail thing, I don't think I was expecting. That was, I guess, a unique Nooks answer. Because like my immediate thought is like in-mail pretty much equal to voicemail. Now my brain's stuck on it. In-mail equal to email in the sense that like, kind of how you said, I'm gonna see it regardless. It's more about what's the content inside of the thing. So it's like, what did you say? Like, if I sent you an in-mail that hit on these 4 points, are you going to care that it came into your LinkedIn inbox versus your email inbox?
Personally, I've been conditioned to see all in-mail as spam.
Yeah, that's fair. Like most in-mail is like typically not quality mail, but you could also make that argument for email too. I think a lot of that would be like subject line, preview text, those aspects, right? So it'd be like your CS role, and then it would start off with like, congrats on like hiring for a CS role. I imagine you put a lot of thought into the types of skills that you'd want for this role. One of the key things I've seen from interviewing folks that have been your customers is they're looking for X and they feel like the sales team doesn't have time to provide that. I've been in that seat before. I know exactly what y'all need to do. Curious, does this sound like you'd want to have a conversation about it? Right? Like,
someone should steal that script right now and put it into an email and send it over.
Yeah, I'm like, what would my dream candidate say?
Love it.
Yeah, I've done all of these things before, and it's going to be a cakewalk. Do you want to have a conversation? Yes, I do. In fact, I want to hire you.
On the spot.
Which I think that's the last thing that we haven't really touched on, which is the ask within, whether it's an email, a voicemail, a video, which is like, I kind of think of this similar to selling, which is like, I don't think the ask is like, does this sound like the type of person that you want to hire? Or it's more of like, maybe it is. I don't know. What do you think? I'm mulling on it.
I feel the ask should be very similar to kind of a cold email type of ask that you've spoken about a lot, particularly in the Mousetrap template, Mousetrap framework, which is like, curious to learn more or interested to chat. A very soft ask, I feel, can go a longer way than just asking for an interview straight up, or just even raising interest. I feel asking a question that is interest seeking could in itself generate interest in the person reading.
Yeah, because like one of my things that always drives me nuts is when sellers sell in the CTA, they like muddy what they want with what they do, and it's like I could see that being like an example of that, like overselling in the ask, being like worth a conversation to see how I can help you build out your CS team, right? It's like too much. It's much better to be softer and just say like, hey, is this worth a conversation? Yeah. Based on what you can see here, do you think I could help? Right? Like something so simple will probably
keep
take
the barrier to doing certain activities upon replying, or the commitment you make on replying, like super low. Not like, I have to buy this if I meet with this person. Just got to spend a couple of moments chatting about relevant interests. I think also, just going back, I realized main reason why I didn't have a strong preference towards InMail is the fact that I'm just thinking, why don't people just connect with me and then like send me a DM?
That's fair. I get emails where it's customer support questions, so I've seen it all. Well, Vishnu, we're at time, and I really appreciate you jumping on. Your post got me excited to have this conversation. I love that it's the 1 year week when you finally get that interview.
Thank you.
Any parting wisdom for folks, places that they can follow you, etc.? Just push through your LinkedIn.
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. I talk about kind of how we've been building Nooks from scratch, founded the go-to-market team, created this SDR motion, and how I feel like job seekers can level up and use the same strategies that I used before Nooks and in Nooks as well to get meetings and interviews with folks. And yeah, I am also willing to help you make cold calls or write cold emails for that matter
Yep.
if you want to prospect some SDR managers. So hit me up.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel like I would be remiss not to say this. If you are job seeking and you are doing that outbound, you're writing those notes, our software is free for you to use until you land that role. Just go to install.lavender.ai. You can go to lavender.ai and hit the install now button. Just shoot us a note and we'll hook it up. So appreciate all of y'all joining. Be sure to take Vishnu up on his offer there. And per usual, thanks and good luck with the job hunt.
Good luck. Thank you for having me.